Well, good morning, Keith. How are you
Good
today?
morning.
um, so good to be with you here today.
Likewise.
Doing the Hollywood Breaks thing again.
Yeah, very exciting.
I just want to share with our audience. It's welcome to our show today, our podcast, our video cast, whatever we're calling these things nowadays. I feel like in the pandemic, we're changing the name of this format
Pretty much
because
everything.
everyone's doing it, and it doesn't feel like we're casting as much anymore as we're consuming. So
Yes,
we call
very
it
true.
like the web content or whatever. This is Hollywood Breaks, and this is where we like to share our insights of what we've captured in the industry, mostly picking the ideas and thoughts off of Keith's connections throughout the industry. He and I love to banter as we develop our own content. And in that content game, it's always good to stay connected, understand the pivot, and keep ourselves strong in mind. So we wanted to share some of those thoughts with you. So I'm Tim Thompson. Good to be with you today. And this is my colleague, Keith. Keith, welcome.
Hello.
Introduce yourself. Tell us who
Great
you
to
are.
be here. Happy to be here. Love talking about the industry. I'm glad that we chose a business that never is boring, put it lightly. I've been in this industry for 15 plus years, and like I said, it never gets boring. There's always something exciting happening, and I love being a storyteller, and that's really what drives my passion, and that's why I think this industry is so great, despite all the ups and downs it has gone through in the last few months. Hard to believe I'm saying that, not years, but again, I think it's great, and just love talking to all the conversations I have with colleagues of mine in this business, and what we think is coming down the pike, and sharing that knowledge with you all.
Yeah, I really do feel like we're kind of a lucky duo in a way. The connections that we have, just normal conversations that we have, and to be able to dive into some of those thoughts, we have our ear to the ground in such a way. So I'm actually kind of curious about some of the articles I've read this week, and I want to get your thought on some of this too.
Yeah.
The big one that I've read this week was this Disney Plus article. So Disney Plus, hits their 5-year goal, I think, within 5 months at 60 million for that platform. They have other entities as well. They have Hulu Plus, ESPN, and then a whole bunch of syndicate programs as well through the acquisition of Fox. So they're clearly set up for so much in the content game and the distribution game. But if you ask me, pivoting off of a conversation from last week, they really still are stuck in like that distribution dilemma. It's hard to know like where the eyeballs are going to go. Even with all that market share, it feels to me like they're still shifting things around and kind of guessing where the eyeballs are going to hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely very interesting that when they pulled Mulan off the schedule, there was a lot of guessing about, well, are they just going to wait to see what happens with Tenet, which, as we talked last week, is, in my mind, the canary in the coal mine in terms of what the theatrical experience and the distribution experience is going to be over the course of the next 3 or 4 months until the end of the year. And I think now that they've decided to not only put it on Disney Plus, but charge a premium for it, which I believe the price is like $30, they're clearly looking for a way to, again, still monetize the content, but at the same time, they don't really want to sit back and wait. They really think the time is now. You got a lot of families that are desperate for content right now. I mean, there's only so many times you can watch Snow White and Cinderella before you really start to feel like you need some new content. And I think from a pricing standpoint, the fact that they chose $30, I think for an average family of 4, that's actually a major discount, because you go out and hire a babysitter, stand in the popcorn line, buy the 4 bags of popcorn, drinks. You're looking at an easy $100 right there. And I think for Disney, the thought process is, well, listen, we can charge $30 for this product, which already has a brand built in, given the fact that it's based on the original animated property. So I think their goal here is to, again, attract the eyeballs, but at the same time, be able to monetize in a way that can sort of somewhat mitigate the huge losses that they face with the closing of the parks. And
it's kind of like an inflated DVD price, right? $30. I think we used to pay $20 for DVD or whatever.
Yeah.
But of course, that was the second run. The DVD after theatrical, they made all their money back. Then they go to DVD, get a second market.
Yep.
to go direct to video. Like they really are
Right.
they just skipped all distribution. When direct to video, they're paying, I mean, obviously $30, no distribution cost because they own the platform or whatever. And we're paying a subscription for Disney Plus on top of the $30, which feels like a little bit of a cable model there, if you ask me. You pay for the cable service and then pay for the pay-per-view. But I'll go back to when the first thing you say is like, they're actually, if you ask me, they're out of content. I mean, Disney Plus at 60 million subscribers did not have that much depth to keep people interested. Mm-hmm. This feels like they're really just, I mean, hopefully they have a plan, but I feel like they're just burning all the resources they had, maybe because they didn't expect to grow this fast. They started out kind of shallow.
Yeah, I think well, I mean, it's the never-ending debate, and this may be another topic we can discuss on another podcast, but if you look at all the streamers, they all have their strengths. You know, Netflix, of course, is well ahead in the production game. You know, the argument is, well, do you have more original content or do you have library? Now, Disney obviously went with the library philosophy, given the depth of their library and the popularity of their library, especially some of the older animation titles that sort of call nostalgia to the parents, as well as allow them to introduce it to their kids.
As well as the Fox depth, the television.
Yeah, the Fox depth and, you know, all, you know, the classic action movies, Die Hard, Predator, what have you. Again, sort of they can tap all that. But again, if you think about, you can only lay your laurels on that for so long, because if you look at Disney Plus in general, what have they had other than Mandalorian?
Yeah.
Nothing really. They haven't had anything that sort of popped and been like a pop culture sensation, which is something that Netflix is quite good at. You know, this past week they had, I think, the Kissing Booth 2 or something like that, which was a hit, and everybody on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok were talking about it. And, you know, I think that's Disney Plus's challenge, to your point, Tim, that they don't really have a lot of original content. And I think because they grew so quickly and they weren't anticipating to hit their numbers this fast, they're realizing now that we need content. Like, we need new content. And they're also fronting the fact that their VP of content, Agnes Chu, just left this past week and she's going to Condé Nast. So now they have sort of a hole in there that Ricky Strauss, who's the president of Disney Plus, is going to have to fill and figure out, well, we need to churn a lot of this. We need to get content on the platform, because at a certain point, because people have been home so long, they're going to want something other than just library titles.
We've been eating through it. And there's something, to go to the idea of nostalgia, there's something about consuming the content, which is totally great. But if you're in a movie theater, think about the time it takes to load up your kids. I mean, the anticipation. You watch 6 trailers before the time it gets there. You load up your kids in the car. It takes you time to get there. The movie experience is a couple hours. You drive yourself home. You burn 4 hours watching a 2 hour, an hour and a half piece of film. Here, like in 2 hours, you could almost burn 6 hours worth of content, because you could skip through, move things around. You could use binge watch something. So yeah, I mean, to their strength, they obviously have a very solid foundation. Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar. Those are evergreen items no matter what. And there'll always be new kids on the planet. So there will always be kids falling in love with these iconic ideas again. But they're really going to have to run for the play. And I have a feeling they're going to lose the Disney standard a little bit in making some of that content. Probably more like Disney television shows than it will look like Disney film when some of this content finally launches.
Yeah, I think that is another challenge they have. They're one of the only studios, well, I would argue they're the only studio really that has a brand. And that has been a blessing and a curse for them in a lot of ways. Because, for example, you look at the other streamers like Apple TV Plus, Peacock, they only have brands. So there's no expectation that if some R-rated film is thrown up on the platform, that, oh my goodness, this is so contra Peacock's brand or contra Apple TV Plus's brand. So I think that's something that they definitely have to take in consideration. That being said, they do also have Hulu, which can sort of serve as the adult side of the entertainment equation. So, but again, you know, Disney is such a hefty brand that if you've got all these people on Disney Plus, you're going to start having creators and filmmakers being like, well, wait a minute, if Hulu only has this many people, why can't I be on Disney Plus as well and just attract me to as many pieces of the audience because in the theatrical experience, that's basically what they have access to as many people in the audience as they want, barring obviously the ratings and whether or not it's an R-rated film or whatnot. But you can advertise to an entire audience. Whereas with Disney, it's sort of like there's buckets. You have the Disney Plus audience, which is obviously family oriented. You have the Hulu audience. So it sort of creates that challenge of like, okay, well, the filmmaker comes to us with an idea and they want to be broad, as broad as possible. Like, for example, like Netflix, which you have access to everybody. That's another challenge I think Disney's going to face as well in terms of, getting the content and content makers to, want to come to the doorstep and have access to the broadest audience possible.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the challenges that come up against in the promotion of this. So we can get a broader stroke here too, but obviously the Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN, that whole growth area for Disney is very great. But part of the article I read is they're also talking about shuttering 20 traditional channels, right? Mostly in Asia Pacific and Eastern Europe, kind of are where the largest cutbacks are going to take place. But the idea, like they're actually walking away from some of the traditional television models to double down on these items here. Very interesting. But what happens is like you start losing the passive viewer. The passive viewer can't watch television and aren't watching from show to show and skipping from shows that way. We're all kind of pressing the button, choosing our items and moving on. We have an issue when it comes to then promotion space, commercial space. And as we know, you can feel the agencies are kind of falling apart too because of all that missing airtime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely one of those things where you have to look at it and say, okay, I think it's a great point in terms of like you're losing a lot of the shuffle audience. And I think a lot of promo time, because that I think is a lot of the challenge in terms of where the shift is happening. Because if you go to a streamer, it's difficult to really see any promo materials. I mean, I think Netflix has had this challenge probably, for most of their theatrical experience.
Sunset Boulevard, I don't see anything that's consistent.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, exactly. It's like if you're in LA, and for those of you who've never been to LA, it's very much it's like a billboard central. It's like you see billboards like every other block, and it's so much that a lot of it's part of the whole process and sort of the mix of marketing assets that you have at your disposal. And what are you going to do when you don't have? I mean, the TV spot has been dying, but it's still a cornerstone of sort of announcing when your release is coming up. And I know Netflix has played with sort of the TV promo game, but it's tough to say that that's been success. So it's interesting to me because so much of what Disney has done so well over the course of a lot of their theatrical campaigns and whatnot is that there is just it's a universal message across all channels.
Yeah.
And they're able to hit you wherever you are. I mean, most of you can probably think back to the Avengers campaign and just, it was everywhere. You couldn't turn an eye. You walk into Walmart and you're just bombarded with it. Turn on your TV and you're just bombarded with it. You watch any show and there's some sort of cross promotional thing happening. And that's what they're really great at. And it's interesting with the closing of some of the linear channels. I think it's going to be a challenge for them to sort of really find, where their audience is. And I know a lot of the studios are struggling now in terms of they're building these massive data teams to figure out how we can reach our audience because so much of the model is shifting.
And where everyone's eyeballs are inside of TikTok.
Yeah.
Like where no one's watching YouTube anymore. I mean, except for beside the channel that we're producing right now, obviously.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Which I guess isn't necessarily true. I've heard recently 15% of all internet traffic goes across YouTube. So YouTube has plenty of viewers. But the eyeballs that they're trying to reach, it's hard to get inside of some of that content anymore, especially the user-based content. Yeah. I also feel like Hollywood is breaking in those ways too, because all of it seems to connect, right? So when you go SVOD strictly, you lose the promo space. So now those service industries are shifting and moving. We don't have the airtime anymore, so agencies are breaking their ability to put their content on there. The brands a lot of the commercial time that we've become somewhat accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sort of the value of the talent also doesn't play anymore, right? If I have people watching SVOD and TikTok and all these OTT kind of ideas, then that character, the Jennifer Aniston, doesn't really have a play anymore to fill in the airtime gap, to draw the attention in and get the eyeballs anymore.
Yeah.
And then for the value of the talent, the value to the agencies even fall apart. You could just feel it crumbling in so many different areas.
Yeah. I think, again, I think a lot of the way Hollywood is set up in a lot of ways, particularly within the studio system, is that there's just millions of little pieces that sort of line up to the studio system and rely on the studio system and the distribution model to really support them. And what I mean by that is, so to your point, with promo time getting smaller and smaller and less opportunities, you have a lot of the entertainment marketing agencies that are struggling to figure out a way how they survive. There are only so many streamers to go around.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the bigger trailer houses are suffering. I've been talking to an editorial colleague of mine who works at one of the bigger name shops, and he said it's just like, it's boom or bust. Like, one minute they start cutting on a movie, and then they get a phone call and say, stop, we're not sure when this is coming out. We don't know where we're going to promote it. So it's.
And I think I might have mentioned last week where former colleague of mine at Trailer Park went off to another place. They shuttered their doors through COVID.
Yeah.
Like, there is just nothing to make. So, and they can't keep up with the high price of editors and whatever.
Yeah, they can't keep up with the high price, and studios are, pulling back on the budgets because they're obviously not releasing money. So that revenue stream is drying up. But also, look at sort of the other ancillary markets that sort of rely on the studio system. You've got, the marketing agencies, as we mentioned. You've got consultants. You've got publicists. You've got PR reps. And even some of the bigger talent agencies. Like, a big news the end of last week was that CAA, which is known in town as sort of like, if you've ever been to their building on Avenue of the Stars, it's like the Death Star. They laid off 90 people and they furloughed 270 plus.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is it's really starting to show that there's just a seismic shift happening in the industry in terms of what everyone's role is going to be when sort of all the dust settles. Because the interesting thing is, the agencies over the course of the last, I would say, 10 years or so, have really become a lot of the gatekeepers in terms of talent. When I was interning, when I started my career for the producer at Sony, they drilled into me, you cannot take a script unless it comes from an agency or a manager or a rep. Like, you can't take a script from some John Q. Public off the street. There were legal reasons for it, obviously, but obviously it was in the interest of a lot of the agencies to be the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And when I moved into development at New Line Cinema, it was sort of like, I would just wait for scripts to pile up on my desk from the agencies. So for me, some of the more interesting aspects of it are sort of, well, what does this mean in terms of studio development execs? Are they going to have to start doing a lot more of the finding the original stories, finding the talent, finding the new directors, and not just waiting for everything to sort of plop on their desk? And for us, it's sort of content, developers. I think this is an opportunity because, there is going to be sort of a widening of the gate per se, which I think is a good thing. And obviously, I don't begrudge anyone losing their livelihood. I don't want that at all. I mean, there's so many good people in Hollywood that, are going to be adversely affected by this. But at the same time, I think this is sort of like, it's been building for a long time. And I think COVID just sort of like,
showed the weakness. Yeah.
Showed all the cracks and have just exploited it. And now it's just sort of starting to crumble. And I think the question a lot of people are asking is, for those of you who follow the business of the industry on a day-to-day, there's the whole strike with the WGA and the agencies in terms of the whole concern about packaging. And a couple of the agencies have started to negotiate, but at the same time, even before COVID hit and everything locked down and production was shut down, there were still TV shows being produced. So even though the writers had technically fired their agents, there were still shows being produced.
Yeah, so it's such a different dynamic nowadays, isn't it? Where And by the way, we just took a major shift. We should let our audience just take a deep breath, because I think we just shifted from the deep end out to the deep ocean.
Yes. Rein me in, Tim. Rein me in. That's what you're good at.
No, it's all fair, because we really are kind of just comprehending all that shifting at one time. Yeah. And clearly COVID has had its impact, because of the viewing audience has changed. But this has been going on for longer than that. The Disney Fox acquisition was way before COVID, so we know that that's not just a reactionary process. But yeah, to your point, that so CAA dropping agents. Mm-hmm. By the way, like, let's just be honest, like, the overhead of an agency is very little. It's just human beings making deals. It's not like they're making widgets and you need a factory. No. So if there are transactions taking place, agents are getting paid. The fact that they dropped 90 of their agents and 200 people.
I believe it was about 90, and they furloughed about 275, which is, I think, a bulk of them were assistants.
Yeah, so that's like the equivalent of looking at the economy and measuring housing starts, like, to recognize that things are slowing down, that transactions aren't taking place. If the agents have to be let go, there's no money exchanging hand. So, that's the big indicator there. That's the red flag there is, well, where are those transactions? If the agents aren't doing it, do they exist at all? Do they completely disappear, or do they move somewhere else? So to pivot to the next thing you're talking about really is the idea of, like, where did they go? Because if the WGA strike doesn't affect the television content being produced, mm-hmm. I think it's really kind of showing the marketplace that the independent developers are coming out of the woodwork. Like, I don't need an agent to get something distributed anymore, right? You and I can put a team together very easily, especially in a COVID environment where people are working from home anyway. Content is so simple. You get a film star with his own camera turned on talking, like, that's content anymore. So clearly that leverage where the agencies would play, where you would need the WGA to be part of it, something has taken place. I think it's good news, because I'm in the content making game, and I don't want all the gatekeepers to tell me no. But that shift is real, and we have to be able to understand it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think this is, again, I think this is good news in a lot of ways. I think a lot of what's happening in the industry has built up over years upon years. And, I'm a big believer in the phrase innovate or die. And obviously I have a deep love and cherishment for the entertainment industry in general. I've been in it for, as I said, top of this 15 plus years. And I really want to see it succeed and change and evolve. And I think that's a lot of what you're seeing right now. You're seeing a lot of the changes that have been discussed for years upon years, but, and sort of in an industry that's been around for so long, and its inability to innovate, I think this has really helped force the issue in a lot of ways. And I do think it is in the long run, it's good news. I think there's going to be a lot of shocks, and I think that's going to be a bit of a tough slog to get through. But I think for the most part, overall, I think it's good. I think it's good for the audience. They're going to get a lot more content. They're going to be entertained. I think it's great for storytellers, people who love storytelling. Yeah. I'm really hoping.
Don't you feel like it has shifted a little bit? Love to say, like, obviously we're not on the analyst side of the SVOD game and what these companies are doing. They could probably read the tea leaves very easily in the cable market, which someday we should talk about the outcome of Comcast. Because from your old office building, to see those gigantic brand new Comcast buildings being built in downtown Philly, and to know the cable disruption is taking place, I'm very concerned about their mortgage. Yeah. But we'll talk about that later. That double down to SVOD and what that really means, I almost feel like we've shifted way too insular now. And I'm not gaining that ability to find loose content. I kind of miss the days of, like, I'll say, like, the DJ who would introduce the songs to you, right? So of course the downside is that we point out there's a gatekeeper telling the DJ what songs to play, but I would never heard the new song unless someone introduced it to me. Now I feel like a lot of that's being played out only on social media, which keep people in their echo chambers too much. and that general broadcast or that overall pop culture feeling is being dropped out of some of these traditional film and TV.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just about to say, like, I long for the day, because I'm up here on the coast of Maine, which, you know, is a beautiful place in the country. And, you know, we don't have TV here, so it's very sort of disconnected from the day to day. But I was having a conversation with my wife and mother-in-law, and I was just sort of going through some of the 80s and 90s hits, and they're just so memorable, like Field of Dreams and
Ferris Bueller. I just saw that with my kids.
Bueller, you know, all these, and that were just sort of, and that defined a lot of my, like, E.T. and all Top Gun and all these movies that sort of just defined my childhood. And I think to myself how fortunate I was to grow up in that era when films really were such a cultural icon. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the reason why we've sort of lost a little bit of that is because, to your point, the social media of it and just the excess of content. While it may be a blessing that we have so many opportunities, at the same time, are we losing that sense of like a community that can sort of, a film that can sort of drive all of us together that we can talk about? I mean, the unending debate about Avatar and whether or not its cultural relevance will stand the test of time, I think is very relevant to this discussion, simply because it was the highest grossing movie until until Avengers knocked it off the pedestal. But did anybody really talk about Avatar?
Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah.
Was it really a cultural icon like an E.T.? I mean, think about the last time you quoted a movie. The last movie I quoted that was really quotable in my mind was Jerry Maguire. That was really the last movie that everybody sort of, show me the money, you complete me, you know, all those lines. And I don't know if it doesn't happen as much anymore. I mean, maybe it's, again, I'm a little on the older side. You know, I'm not growing up in this era, and maybe there are lines that kids replay to themselves. I don't know, but it doesn't feel like that exists. And that to me is definitely something, you know, I long to see again in the industry, and maybe having sort of that, sort of a lean towards allowing more storytelling, maybe will bring us back to that. But again, you know, to your point, maybe it's an embarrassment of riches in terms of the number of content we have.
Yeah, I think in not only just in film and television as well. I was at a event this last Saturday night with just a couple of friends of ours, and we were talking about just the WWF. I mean, we could name almost all the wrestlers, the words that they say, the goofy things, certain highlights. Obviously, that's just like cheesy, stupid television, but it was like it had a pop culture attachment to it.
Yeah.
And pop culture I think, is what's changing. And I think that's what's changing a lot of our consuming of content and what's breaking Hollywood in a lot of ways. It's moving pieces around that we're not used to. And we're looking for that. Now we use the word viral, right? We're looking for something that just gets a ton of viewers so that YouTube or Facebook can attach an ad to it. Yeah. But it doesn't seem to have that same cultural relevance to it. And I also think the irresponsibility of the cable news networks that are just constantly bombarding with one message 24 hours a day and not adding any flavor or understanding, or even just breaking up news with anything else. Feels very irresponsible with airtime and people's time of what they're able to consume.
I agree.
We can get into way too many topics in this.
Well, like I said, you rein me in every now and then. I love it. You got to pull me in every now and then.
But let's just say that our takeaway today, right? Let's just kind of wrap up a takeaway today. What I'm hearing is that we can see the shift taking place. And to me, the obvious one I'd point back to is the CAA layoff. It just shows that the transactions are moving. They're very different in form. I have another article we could talk about some next week about how the agencies themselves are losing even the client lead. The client managers aren't necessary anymore because that client management part of it, of the experience, is not necessary when it comes to promoting, putting commercials out there, getting your brand out there anymore.
Yep.
So there's that lack of transaction or the movement of those transactions straight to consumer in an SVOD model really is kind of changing things. And for better or worse, the gatekeepers are moving and possibly getting smaller. But for content makers, it feels like the doors are more open.
Yep. Agree.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, agree. Well, agree. I mean, again, it's so interesting to see. I mean, I know I started at the top of this with, so it's great we live in such a boring industry, but it's just the constant shifting and changing of where things are moving it's exciting. I really think that, as someone who has been on the inside of the big studio system and the frustrations that build up from, doing things the same way over and over again, the definition of insanity, as they say, and not really looking for change. For me, this is an exciting time. The changes that, I worked with a lot of wonderful people at my time at Fox, but we all just used to bemoan, like, why do we keep doing things exactly the same as they've done before?
Yeah.
The going joke is like, okay, well, we have a movie that's very similar to this movie, so let's get that movie's campaign and just mimic what they did. Well, I mean, come on, like that's not really original thinking there, and it's frustrating. And I think the fact that now this is all happening and everything that's sort of in our little side conversations in our offices about why are we doing it this way, is finally like people are like, okay, wait, maybe we shouldn't be doing it this way. Maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe we need to look at the models and sort of figure out a better way to make a product that's really going to touch people in a different way than, just sort of, as you said, the 24-hour news cycle where people just get desanitized and they don't feel anything anymore.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, you asked for it, Keith, you got it. Things are breaking. And that's why we do Hollywood Breaks on every Friday morning, so we can process the things that we've heard and the things we want to talk about, but also talk about the thing we love most, which is being in the content game, working in Hollywood, loving the people the creative people that we get to work with every day. So
I agree.
Hey, it's good to see you this week.
You
if
too.
you love what you see here, make sure that you are subscribing to us. We're going to make content every Friday until we run out of it, which, as you can tell, is going to be weeks and weeks and years from now. And then next couple of coming weeks, we're going to invite some special guests alongside us, some other content makers, get their sense of what they hear and see. So make sure you subscribe to us and this channel so we can be part of your weekly consuming of content. Also, give us that movie quote that Keith challenged us with. What is the movie quote? The last one you've heard, Jerry Maguire's Keith's "Show Me the Money." To me, I have Ghostbusters stuck in my mind, but I know that is way about the last big quotable movie.
Okay, before we go, what's your favorite from Ghostbusters? Because there are a lot of good.
We came, we saw, we kicked some ass. I love that when he walked in. Yeah, the old Caesar line when he walks in.
Oh, wait, no, isn't it? We came, we saw, we kicked its ass. Even better.
Oh man, we used to quote. I mean, literally quote movies.
We could do a whole podcast on. We could just go through movie quotes. I could do that all.
Yeah, day. Sure. Oh yeah, easily. We should just get a panel of people quoting movies. So share your movie quote. If you like what you hear, tell your friends about it. And until next week, I'm Tim Thompson. This is Keith Rauch, and this is Hollywood Breaks.
Wow, good to see you guys. Take care.